I think we got it. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pass the baton to our host and moderator for this session, my friend and partner in arts, Dina Salanow. We both went to Cal Arts together, and Dina is a wonderful LA-based director, artist, and creator. And I'm so grateful to you, Dina, for agreeing to host this conversation. And so I'm going to pass the baton to you and let you introduce yourself to the group and take it away.
Thank you, David. So my name is Dina Salanow. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am zooming in today from the ancestral land of the Tongva, also in Los Angeles, like David. As he said, I'm a director. I'm also an equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant and facilitator, and I'm an educator. I work with students who are courageously learning via Zoom and making art via Zoom in a couple of places, and I'm also a mother. So if you hear some screeches in the background, it's not a raptor, it's my son.
Hi, and I'm Colleen Jennings-Roggensack. I am Vice President of Cultural Affairs at Arizona State University and Executive Director of ASU GAMAGE. And I'm really thrilled to be here. And I wonder if we might now take down the Aruna Hadi Roy so then we can see, yeah, perfect. Beautiful faces. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So I actually, Colleen, if you don't mind, I'm actually going to read Colleen's bio to you because I think it's very important to state all of the many, many, many things that you do. So Colleen Jennings-Roggensack is an arts leader and visionary. She is Vice President for Cultural Affairs for Arizona State University and Executive Director of ASU GAMAGE. She serves on the Broadway League's Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee, Government Relations Committee, the Executive Committee, and the Board of Governors, Labor Committee, and co-chairs the Road Presenters Intra-Industry Committee, and is Arizona's only Tony voter. Colleen is a founding and current member of the Creative Capital Board and senior advisor to Women of Color in the Arts, former Association of Performing Arts Professionals board president. She has served on the National Council of the Arts at the bequest of President Clinton and is a life director of the Fiesta Bowl. She is a consultant to universities, international governments, and a featured speaker at conferences. And that's the short version of her.
Thanks, Dina.
So welcome. I'm so happy to be here chatting with you today. And we had a short little window to talk yesterday, and I'm so excited to dive in.
Me too.
So I wanted to start today by simply asking, how are you?
Wow, you know, Dina, that is probably the most loaded and political question that anyone can have today, because right now we are going through two pandemics, the pandemic of COVID-19 and the pandemic of systemic racism. So I currently believe that we are all suffering from PTSD from those two pandemics, and yet the hope is on the horizon. So I feel like I am cautiously, hopefully optimistic that not only are we going to get through the COVID-19 pandemic, but we're addressing some very serious issues in terms of systemic racism, and that is going to continue to go forward. And everyone, particularly in our industry, has turned their attention there, and not just nationally, but internationally. So I might say I am COVID okay, and I am JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, optimistic.
Thank you. Thank you. And yes, it wasn't as simple of a question as maybe it used to be. How are you?
One of the things, though, is great about that question now is people actually lean into it. It used to be, how are you? Oh yeah, really? What I wanted to talk to you about was people actually now wait for a response and wait to listen. So that's an amazing thing for us. And I also forgot to say, I respond to she, her, and hers. And I am on the Gila River Reservation, which I can see outside of my window.
Thank you. And so you hold so many roles in the American theater. What led you to theater in the first place?
You know, it's interesting, like all of us, my parents actually led me to theater. My father was in the Air Force, and so we moved. I lived in 13 states and 2 foreign countries before I went off to college. And my parents always felt the first thing we needed to do at any place we moved was get an understanding of the culture. And we did that by going to the theater, by going to museums, by visiting people in the communities that they were in. So I think I have been training all of my life to be in this role that I am in now. And I have amazing memories from living in Naha, Okinawa for 6 years and seeing the no theater, seeing traditions of the Yanamaru people, the culture of bringing the harvest in from the sea. So I think I've always been that person because of my parents. They actually gave me 3 sacred texts, and those sacred texts are, my mother said, you will be a great success if you broaden your horizon. My father said, you must give back to the community, and he didn't define community, so that was up to me. And the third thing he said, because he is my father, or was my father, my parents have both passed, is get a job, get a job, get a job. And so those were the 3 things he told my siblings and myself. And I think that sort of led us on the journeys that we each chose to be on.
That's so amazing how you're saying how you're talking about your first introduction to theater, because for me and perhaps like many others, my first introduction to theater was thinking in terms of Broadway. Was thinking in terms of and I grew up right outside of New York, so that's part of it. But I almost feel like your introduction, it seems like your family was coming from a place of deep storytelling and already from the get-go seeing theater as a creative and cultural exchange.
Yes.
and a space where values are held up, and that in a way that I feel like I figured out after a while, but my first introduction was commercial
theater.
It's really interesting to hear. Yeah.
And I think all of that played a role in my life. And my very first musical was Ethel Merman in Gypsy. And my parents were fairly fearless about just taking us places. And so we got there, I remember the ushers, and we were in the cheap seats, and the usher said, I don't think this is a show for children. And I was pretty young, I was probably 5. And my parents, they're amazing people. They said, we'd rather, because it's kind of risque, and my parents said, we'd rather expose them to risque than violence. So that was that. And so Broadway played that kind of a role in our lives when we were stationed at Billy Mitchell Air Force Base. And we went in to see shows, and I had some crazy aunties. My parents and many of my relatives have passed away. And they would say, we're going to second act. And I go, what's second act? And they would take us. And when people came out at intermission, we would go in. And my auntie said, and you don't go to the balcony, go straight down to the orchestra, because those are the seats that are going to be open. I second acted a lot of shows. Running a theater now, bad idea. But I can just remember just sneaking in and going, okay, I'm hoping no one's going to throw me out of this seat, and watching the show. And then as we got older and we moved to different places, we learned to volunteer usher. So we saw a lot of theater, but second acting was my introduction to Broadway.
I love that. I second acted a lot of shows in college. I second acted a lot of shows. Oh, I love that. So I think almost growing out of how your first introduction to theater was coming from this very deep holistic place. I think now as artists and arts leaders, so many of us are working constantly to create space for ourselves and our unique voices, and also creating spaces for others and advocating for others through our work.
Yeah.
What does advocating for yourself look like? And what does advocating for others look like in your experience?
No, and that is such a great and powerful question. And it almost is one and the same for me when I mentor, and I mentor a lot of young people, and they say, well, you know, how do you speak up for yourself? And I said, I don't speak up for me. I speak up for you. I speak up because I know that you're going to come behind me, that you're going to stand on my shoulders. So when I'm in a situation, and trust me, if you are breathing, you are always afraid in these situations. So it isn't like, oh, this great bravado, but I always think of the young BIPOC woman who's going to come behind me, or the young BIPOC man, or the person who hasn't been at the table. And I'll give you an example. And just because I am at the academy, we are not immune to those things. And early on, when I first came to Arizona State University, there was a meeting, and the then president, Laddie Core, said, I need you to come to the meeting. And I don't even remember what we were discussing, but it was a round table, and it was all white men in suits. And so I would tell my husband, I'm going to one of those white suits meetings. And by the way, my husband's white. I'm going to one of those white suit meetings. And so we were discussing something, and I said, ABC. And the discussion kept going on. About 15 minutes later, someone said ABC, a white man, and the other white man went, what a great idea. So again, thinking of the young woman that's going to come behind me, I raised my hand. I said, yes, Colleen. I said, you know, I have a question for you. Do you have a problem listening to the sound of a woman's voice? And of course, immediately, I didn't like get mad. I went very calmly, and they were like, what? Wait, what are you talking about? I said, because 15 minutes ago, I said ABC, and it was a great idea then, just as it is now. And they were all like, and I never had that issue again in that room, never. And, you know, it's a difficult thing to be in those situations, and we still are. Here it is 2020, and I still sit on boards that are not reflective of our country, organizations that are not reflective. And I always have to say, you have to speak up, but you don't have to speak up for you. You have to speak up for the person coming in behind you so that they know and understand. So to me, advocating for myself is really advocating for those coming behind me. And it's true with salary discussions. It's true when you have to have the unpopular point of view. It's not for you, it's for the person behind you.
Thank you. I might be chewing on that for a little bit. And thank you for that example. Also, it's helpful to hear that concrete example in those moments I know where I start panicking and going through 5,000 options of how I could address this, of so simple and so gracious and so direct. So in this strange living in a Zoom box time, what theater or performance is happening now that you found to be exciting? And what is inspiring you right now?
You know what's truly inspiring me are young people. And as you can imagine, I get a gazillion emails a day inviting me to something. And it's always that young person saying, we're working on this, and would you come via Zoom? And I go, yes. And Ethan Fox is one of those young men. He's a young Asian man. And he said, I'm working on reconstructing Julius Caesar, and I'm casting this amazing cast of BIPOC people, all young. And he goes, and I have this idea. And I go, well, what is it, Ethan? And he said, I'm going to make it a party. And I go, ooh, Julius Caesar, a party. Okay. And he goes, I'm going to have people come early, and we're going to have a dance, and I'm going to send out party boxes with things in them. And I went, oh, okay. And he said, it's going to be $30. They said, great, I'll send you 30. He goes, no, I'll send you the party box for free. I go, no, you are an actor who's not employed. I'm going to pay my $30. And in the box was a poster, the program, 2 Rice Krispie treats, and those glow sticks that you could make a necklace or a crown. And the first 30 minutes before Julius Caesar, which did go on for 3 hours, happened, we danced, and we were dancing, and I thought, that's so great. And I said, I want to know the next thing you're doing. And my daughter went to Williams College, and one of her colleagues, or one of her cohorts, Kyle Martin, called me and said, I'm working on a thing. And I go, what's the thing you're working on? He goes, I'm working on this one person kind of stand-up thing. And he was a dancer, and I had known and followed his dance career. He goes, would you watch it? And I said, of course I would. And he goes, you would? I go, yes. And it was really interesting. And he did different characters, and he did costumes, and some of it was terrible, but some of it was interesting. And mostly on the Zooms were aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas, but there was such life and vibration to it. I've seen, and we've done with our subscribers and donors some live stream work. We did American Dialogue, which was really great and exciting. We worked with Fuel Theater. We had brought over the Barbershop Chronicles, Inua Ellen's piece, and we're actually going to do another live stream piece of Inua's as well. And those were interesting, and those were great. And Bill T. Jones just had one this week that we helped to support, where he had a panel beforehand, and then the recreation of the piece that Arnie had designed, Continuous Replay, set on the company. And then Janet Wong, who's the assistant artistic director, did a video of it. And I thought that was very intriguing. But I am really, really curious about young artists, because they are making work in a time where this is all they know. You know, it's one thing different when you have an artist whose experience has been around a long time. They can pivot and say, okay, because we're going to do Taylor Mack's holiday sauce. And Taylor and I had a long conversation. He's like, I don't want to do it. I don't like digital. I want to be live. And then he sort of rethought, oh, I'm going to put out an album, so maybe I can do it that way. And then we are going to honor, and not just us, but all of the presenters who are doing this, we're going to honor an LGBTQAI leader and an elder who was one of the first. And so that's going to be an important part of that as well. And I find that exciting, but I really find young people making work very exciting.
Amazing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And also, I'm just so thrilled to hear that these young emerging artists are contacting you saying, come see my show, and you just go, yes.
Yeah. It is one of those things, and you can ask Dave Mack, who's here. Someone said, call Colleen, and I will always return the call, always copy in my assistant, Michelle, because then she'll say, did you call David back? Yes, I did call David back. But I find that you are my tribe. You are my chosen tribe. And I was fortunate that my mentor, Shelton Stanfield, brought me into the tribe and was always there for me until the day he passed, always there for me. And it goes back to my dad saying, you must give back to your community, to your tribe. So you find you have the most amazing conversations you didn't know you were going to have.
So speaking of the tribe, I want to, in a moment, open this up to our tribe here and have these conversations that we can't imagine. But first, I do want to make sure we have a little bit of time for you to share about the Broadway League Fellowship.
Yes,
that is coming up, and other professional development opportunities or fellowships through organizations you're affiliated with.
Right. What's really has been wonderful about the Broadway League, and I've been on the board for over 2 decades now, is we've been building up work ways that we can help and support the diversification of Broadway and what is happening on Broadway. And there are 2 programs. One of those programs is the Broadway Fellowship. And the Broadway Fellowship is a program where we actually pay someone and pay their taxes and everything to be in a fellowship ranging from 16 to 24 weeks. One of our first fellows, Leon Gray, who's wonderful. He's a producer. He's done his work. His piece, Black Angels Over Tuskegee, has been running in a church off of Broadway for a long time, but he really wanted to get into the producing world. And one piece of advice I share with everyone is this is a business of relationships. I can't think of a business that relies on relationships more than anything. I see Michael Alexander on here. I see Christina Wong on here. I see long-term relationships where you can pick up a phone and call someone and move on. So Leon was our Broadway fellow with Junkyard Dogs, which is Sue Frost and Randy Adams' company, which they currently have Come From Away on. And he went and joined them for 24 weeks. He read scripts. He flew over the country and did auditions. He opened a show, and all of those skill sets he was able to take back with him. And he's done a couple more shows now, but more importantly, those relationships. Even though he was working in New York, he didn't have those relationships. So that's what the Broadway Fellowship is about. And it also, in the Broadway League's Broadway Fellowship is about, it also includes general manager fellowship, company manager, press agent, presenter, and we had we had a Broadway fellow, and he was with us for 24 weeks, and he learned what it meant to have a show come into the house, marketing, box office development, a whole host of things that you don't get in college. And it was, hands-on experience. And because we do, pre-COVID, we do like 20 weeks of Broadway, but we also have presented Christina, and we do a myriad of performances of companies and musicians. We have creative residencies. And so we were able to just turn things over to him, saying, oh, here's your project, go do it. And at the end of that, then he went off to go and make his way. There's another program, which is an internship program, which is not paid, but the Broadway League does. It's called the League ACPAM program, and it's about learning how to be a company manager. And since you're in LA, I know CTG does that program, and you essentially trail a company manager from the time they load in until the time they load out, and learn that skill set. And as a result, that program, I think we're 3 years, almost 4 years now, we have 6 young people of color working on Broadway, which is astronomical. And so, so those are 2 of those programs. But I also wanted to say the Black Theater Coalition, as a result of dealing with the second pandemic, a lot of groups have come up, and Oliver Reed and Warren Adams and Reggie Van Lee started this group. And it is really to do exactly what we're talking about, not only put people in those positions as interns, but pay for their housing. I mean, Warren and I were on the phone the other day, and he goes, Colleen, I just need like $51,000. I said, well, let's think about where that money can come from, and how they're raising millions of dollars so this can happen. And during this time, right before the shutdown, Warren was working with Company, the musical, and they agreed to take on 11 Black interns, and interns who would be paid, who would get housing. And the internships included producer, director, choreographer, scene designer, costume designer, lighting designer, hair, wig, makeup, stage, general manager, music director, and sound design. And, believe it or not, especially Broadway, it was called the Great White Way for a reason. There is very little in terms of administration, in terms of producing, in terms of 2 Black press agents in all of New York. And Irene Gandy, I think, God rest her soul, she's not dead yet. She's not dead, she's just retired, but she's been around since the 50s. So, when you begin to think about that, and even in my position of running a commercial as well as a not-for-profit house, there's not many of me. I love Kendra Whitlock Ingram, who's running a Broadway house in Milwaukee. That's kind of it. It's kind of it. So there's a lot of programs that are being formulated, and a lot of the foundations, God bless Mellon, they just gave $81 million to a series of Black organizations, including Dance Theater of Harlem. Ford, it has just done a program where it has to do with work. I'm not quite familiar with all of it, but as is Duke, and Duke is doing the same thing. Also working with a number of young people who have, because of COVID, didn't have other work to do. I started a discussion with Miranda Goh, G-O-H-H, she's the young Asian woman. And she said, I'm going to, Colleen, with my time off from COVID, she's the company manager of MTC, Manhattan Theater Club, the second stages, which is over by Carnegie Hall. And she goes, I'm going to start a producing company of BIPOC people. And so I just got an invitation from her, TISG, and there's going to be a town hall on December 3rd and December 4th. And they're going to open discussions about, how you put this company together, how we work together, how we're going to raise funds, and what are those funds going to be for. And I will make sure, and it's an invitation, you have to register and be invited, but I'll make sure Dave gets the information and that comes forward. Also, Jackie Bell, who's just amazing, really amazing, a very young, in her 20s, young African-American woman who is one of the producers of Emoji Land, with her name above the title, is also starting a producing company. So young people are getting together and saying, okay, we have to do this for ourselves. We absolutely have to do this for ourselves. We can't do it by ourselves because we've had many discussions on Black Theater United. I've spoken with Kenny Leon and the founders, and that's Broadway Royalty. My husband goes, she always does this, because it's Audra McDowell and Brian Stokes Mitchell and Kenny, and they have had lots of discussions, not just about the theater, but about the world at large that we need to be involved in, which ultimately helps the theater. So we had a great discussion with Cheryl Eichels. Audra did it on, she's the president of the NAACP Defense Fund, about, you know, what are the legalities of the work we're doing? We actually got monies from Mayor de Blasio to help support some of the league programs. So everyone is looking at this. This is the time. That's why I love that quote so much. You know, we're going to go through with very little luggage into a new world and ready to fight for it. The other thing I would also say is we don't know how long this window is going to stay open, because people are going to be frantic. And people are saying, well, we're back at work again. You know, we've got to, you know, start our shows, open our theaters. We were fortunate. We didn't have to let any staff go. We know we were blessed. I had an emergency fund. We also get no monies from the university. I always like to tell people that. It's a $20 million organization. We get no support from the university financially. So but at the same time, we pivoted and have done digital work. And so I put our staff to work doing those things, but people will be hiring. So one of the things, both the Broadway League, BTC, Black Theater United, and Broadway Advocacy Coalition are saying, look, you're gonna hire people back. Some people will be gone. Some people will have gone on to do other things. Now's the time to make your commitment, your Jedi commitment, justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, and look at who you're hiring and rethink what you're hiring, and not just rethink. In a business of relationships, you turn to someone and say, hey, David, who do you know? I'm in need of a house manager. And David will say, I know so-and-so. So David will tell me the people he knows. So what has happened in a business that has traditionally been white is that you know other white people, but you don't know other people of color. So partly the advocacy push that we are doing, not just on Broadway. I sit at the major universities group. I also am with an international presenting group, as well as I frequent back and forth with a consortium of independent producers to say, look at who's at your table. And it's one thing to tell stories, other people's stories. It's another thing to have people at the table. I have a saying, those who choose, those who choose. Boards of directors choose artistic directors. Boards of governors choose CEOs. So we need to be there, we need to be here, and we need to grow up from the bottom. So instead of looking vertically, we're looking horizontally. And that's what needs to happen now. And I would like to make sure we have time for questions, because my husband knows once I start talking, I can talk for a long time.
Well, everything you're saying is gold, so thank you. And I also love how you're naming so many people as you go, and in that way lifting up these individual names and these individual orgs, which I think is so important. Oh, it seems Capri, if I'm pronouncing your name correctly, has a question, which if you'd like, you can either ask us. Oh, there you are. Okay.
There you are. Hi, Capri.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, you're on mute.
So excited. Okay. I think it's wonderful that there's so many opportunities for young people. And what I want to know is where are the opportunities for like 40 and up people. When we were that age, we were that passionate, that visionary, but the opportunities didn't exist. So what is your advice for us? Because
well,
that's kind of like, it's exciting and it's kind of like annoying at the same time.
Yes,
because,
yes,
yes. They're right out of college and there's this and that and
yes.
people.
Yes.
Yeah, so please, I'm in Atlanta, by the way. So
great. Oh, there's Rulon. I want to tell you, Capri, the Broadway Fellowship that I talked about, the League at PAM internship is a young person's program. The Broadway Fellowship is not. The Broadway Fellow is someone who has been out, has been working. Thank you for asking this question. Is somewhere in their career. It's not for someone fresh out of college. Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. And also what BTC is doing, Black Theater Coalition is doing, is looking at people who have been out as well as young people. But you are absolutely right. And the league positions, with the exception of the internship program, are for mid-career people or even later career. Or here's another thing that we have discovered. You might be doing something and you think, people tend to look and say, oh, you love the theater and you're in the theater, so I'm looking for you for a theater job. Well, I don't need my director of business services to really love the theater. I need her to love numbers, which she does. She happens to love the theater. But there's a lot of things that we are talking now about, looking at people and looking at their resumes, and it may not scream theater, but it screams skill sets. So thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And we have a question for Nancy from Nancy in the chat. Nancy, do you want to ask? Would you like me to read it?
I can ask.
Okay.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you, David, for inviting me. Do you know of any programs that support BIPOC artists to experience a performance abroad or to work abroad in theater?
Oh, it's very interesting. We were having the IPG group, which is the International Presenting Group. We actually look at international artists and exchange work here. I can't name a program currently, but what I can tell you is many of the organizations that we are working with, and the Broadway League happens to be one of them, if that's your interest, we have a relationship with SALT in London. We have a relationship with German companies. We have a relationship with Australian and Asian companies as well. So there are a lot of relationships that will connect you to those. But I don't have one off the top of my head, but I will do some thinking and making a couple of phone calls and let you know. And primarily, a lot of the theaters operate differently in different countries, and how they do things and how appointments are made. And what I do have, for instance, if you'd like to learn more about theater in London, Kate McGrath is a producer who does a lot of work there, and we've done a lot of work with Kate. So that's someone that I could put you in touch with. Kamiko's last name does a lot of work in Japan. I probably should say, is there a part of the world in particular that you're interested in?
It was a general question. I personally, I'm very interested in Japan and Germany and England, but it was a general question, and also specifically for BIPOC artists.
Yes. Also have a conversation with Rachel Cooper at the Asia Society, and I was just talking to her this week about something else. But there are a lot of places for BIPOC artists of color in terms of touring. Someone else who's a good mind to pick is Baraka Saleh. And so if you remember those things, and then you write, David, I can do the introduction and the connections.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So Tyree, I believe you have a question being funneled to you.
Yes, I do. The question I got was, if you want to get to the next level in the industry, what are some ways you can start building the relationships with leaders producing in the field during this time?
This is actually what I think is a great time, because we're just spending a lot of time Zooming and working on different things, and to know what you want to do, where you want to do it, and then get the introduction, which is always important to have an introduction. And it's important to also say, I want 20 minutes of your time, because anybody can give you 20 minutes. That's a cup of coffee, 20 minutes. Don't say, I want to have a meeting with you, because that makes people go, what? That's like an hour. Yeah. Is that 20 minutes of your time? And I always ask people before COVID is, find out what you are interested in by finding out, where do you want to live? And that kind of narrows it down. So if you say you want to go to New York City, I say, listen, I will have you talk to Kimmy at Laundromat. I will have you talk with Ruby Lerner in New York. So once you know where you want to be, then that will help. Good question. Good question.
I also got another one too. Well, first off, If you could, Colleen, send me the link for the fellowship so I can share it with everybody.
Yes.
That would be great. That sounds amazing. And my next question I got was, if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach you?
This is my email, cjr@asu.edu. And most importantly, more importantly than my email, is my assistant's email, which you should put on there as well. And it's mmjcap@asu.edu. And it's Michelle Johnson. And she's my executive assistant and my person who says, did you call Terry? Did you send back that email? So that would be great. And I just had a conversation yesterday with a young opera producer. I spoke at Beth Morrison Productions. She did an opera academy with young people, a lot of young people of color. And she said, can I have 20 minutes of your time? So I told her, I said, yes. And then we wound up talking a lot longer. And I gave her some suggestions about, she's a Latinx, what to do with her Latinx opera and where it might be available, and gave her names and said, A, use my name, and B, ask for 20 minutes.
Oh, I see Capri also had a follow-up question. Anything in Africa? A follow-up to Nancy's question.
Yes, and yes, there are a lot of things in Africa, and Baraka Sele, I'm going to give David that. David, do you have Baraka's contact information? And
I
if you
do,
don't,
yeah. Baraka is amazing.
great. She's amazing. She's amazing.
So.
And Baraka Sele and Nikki Shepard and God, who was in a founding group? Linda Walton, myself. There was a group of us. We had a program many years ago called the African Exchange, the Africa Exchange, where we did a lot of work in Cote d'Ivoire. We did a lot of work in Nigeria and Kenya, and Baraka Baraka has kept those relationships up. And in fact, through the CIPG group, our international presenting group, I'm actually having the history of international presenting done in different sections and different parts will be written, and Baraka is doing Africa. And Rachel Cooper's doing Asia. And we are going to A, put that together, B, have a panel discussion in December. There isn't a date yet. Arts Presenters is going to do that. Plus there will be a panel at the conference, because the international presenting is not as old as people think it is. It's relatively new. And so those of us who have been doing it over the past 40 years actually started it and started those relationships. And in particular, Africa was one of those. There's always been the import of European orchestras. I mean, European culture has always been imported, but when you look beyond that, all of that has begun in the time Joe Malillo, John Kalaki, Baraka. There's a handful of us that were dedicated to doing that work many, many years ago. And now we want to look at reviving that and reviving exchange, because with both of these pandemics, international artists have kind of been locked out. Now, American artists is really important and we want to take care of our American artists, but exchange happens both ways, so.
Great. What we can do is, for all of you who signed up, we can add you to our list when we do our follow-up after this session, and we can provide links to resources. So Colleen, any links you'd like to share, I can share that with the group.
Great, great. And I would recommend asking Baraka to come and talk. She would be great.
Yeah.
She would be great. She would be great. And those of you who are interested in South America, Olga Garay English is right there in LA, and she's someone who should come and talk to the group. And she's done a lot of work. She started La Red and a number of international programs in South America, and Christine Miranda King in Mexico. So we did a lot of work there. So that would be really wonderful to have an international discussion.
What else? What else is burning on our minds?
What else are people thinking about? You know, and I will also say, again, when you go to the League website, or you go to APAP website or the WA website, and does WA still do the job bank? David?
I haven't checked. They just revised their website, so
Okay.
it didn't
Because-
come up. I'm not sure, but we can send that link. I can check on
Right,
that.
because there's a lot of jobs in terms of those of you who are not doing creative work, but are creatively interested in administrating. There's a lot of those positions that are coming up. We're looking for a CEO at Creative Capital. BAM will be looking for a new president. Mass Mocha is looking for an artistic director and a CEO. There's just a lot. Every time I turn around, someone is looking for someone to lead a cultural organization at this time. And it looks like Allison said arts professionals does have a job bank as well. Other things. Also, the other thing I think is really interesting for artists at this time is that we are all trying to stay connected to our communities that we serve. And so a lot of theaters are looking at, not just live streaming work, but doing interviews. Like we did a great interview with Kyle Abraham, and we just did one with Daniel J. Watts, who's up for a Tony. We hope he wins his Tony this year. And Lindsay Roberts, who's this amazing, talented performer. So there's a lot of theaters that are looking for content. So that's something to think about, the kind of content that you want to offer. Also, those of you who are running spaces, who are here, we have found with a lot of our donors that they're interested in finding out what we're thinking. So on Saturday, I just spoke at the theater summit that Ken Davenport put together. And I got this little text, Colleen, I'm on the theater summit. And it was one of my very big donors. And she said, I just want to know what's happening in the world. So now we're like sending out notes to our donors, like I would have invited some of them to hear. They go, tell us anytime you're speaking, we would love to be there, just because they want to stay in touch, which is so critical. Other questions or things you might be thinking about? I do think we get such joy from the fact that both Pfizer and Moderna at 94% effective rate. And I just talked with our attorney, and her mother has just been told by their physician that she's going to be given the vaccine in February. So I'm like, yay, yay.
Yeah, Colleen, I actually wanted to jump in with a quick question on that. I saw, if I was reading correctly, it looked like Dr. Fauci was invited to speak at upcoming APAP.
Yes,
and
he is.
would love to hear about, how that happened. That's really, really fascinating.
I think what's been really interesting, and I love the fact that here, thank you so much, Dina, we're talking about art, and we're talking about culture, and we're talking about community. Our lives as presenters and people running houses and producers have been with epidemiologists, have been with scientists. I've been working with epidemiologists in Finland, in Israel, MIT, Harvard, Yale, ASU, Mayo. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing now is work we never thought we would have, a skill set we would have to learn how to do, because we put together our COVID protocols. So when the time comes to open our theaters, and we are doing, like small layering openings, but to get back to sitting side by side, do we have the right air filters in, touchless ticketing systems? How on your phone will you be able to say, I took my at-home test for COVID, just like I took my pregnancy test, and it's negative. That was a joke about the pregnancy, because it would be, God would be calling, because it would be an immaculate conception. Not because of my husband. And so that there are these things now that we are dealing with, and we have to assure a community that it's safe. We have to assure a company. We were talking earlier that DTH was supposed to be with us in April, and we've been talking about having them come and be in a bubble. We would lock them down in a hotel for 2 weeks and test, because ASU has a great testing system, and then test all the crew, and then have them perform and test the audience and have them come. And now it's, right now it doesn't seem possible because all of the ratings are so high. But I think having Dr. Fauci is so exciting, because it's now part of our wheelhouse. Just as, people go, oh, this is gonna be so terrible, it's gonna be awful. I go, no. First of all, people are gonna be thrilled to know they're gonna be safe. But remember when we didn't have to go do max bags and dogs? We do magtometers, bag searches, and dogs. And I said, we all got used to that, and we're going to get used to this. And hopefully the more we know, about this virus, the less we'll have to do as we go along. Because everybody thought, oh, temperature, temperature. It's not temperature, it's spraying. Put on the mask is not a political statement. It means I care about you. And I think everybody on the screen already knows that, so I'm preaching to the choir.
Can I pipe?
I saw Michael with a hand.
Alexander, hey.
And we met in Colorado, God, 45 years ago.
I was 10, so well, shame on you.
I thought it was nursery school, but whatever.
Yeah, thank you.
I just wanted to say about the Fauci speech. I've already sent a message to the conference coordinators. He may be the one with the greatest access to the next president's ear. And in California, the California Arts Advocates have coined the term that the arts are the second responders.
Yes.
And he's making sure that he hears, not only are we hearing from him, but that he hears how we make healthy communities, so that
Yes.
he can go to the president and make the arts the center of his administration's plans for the best for America.
Absolute, Michael, that is so brilliant. And I happen to have been one of the co-chairs for Biden's writing his platform. And so I was able to help write the arts platform. And it's in there and it's solid. And there were writers from all across the country being able to do that. I have to tell you, the opposition didn't include the arts at all in their platform. So it is of concern, but I love that saying that arts are the second responder. I love that. And Michael, that's the first time I've heard it, and I'm going to steal it, but always give you credit. I like that. Arts are the second responder. We are.
It belongs to Julie Baker, if anybody.
Okay.
I'd like to tag on to Michael's comments and something I think you were saying earlier also, Colleen, and that is that I ironically was on a Zoom call just listening to, it's called the Cultural Deal EU, meaning Europe. And it was a number of, pretty high-placed European cultural leaders. And one of the biggest takeaways that I got out of that, and that they're really stressing in their platform, is that because they recognize that culture is fundamental to society, this woman, Maria Gabrielle in particular, was saying we need to reframe political initiatives into societal and cultural initiatives.
Yes.
And I thought that was just so perfect. She goes on to say that culture and cultural heritage are a vector, not simply a sector.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about since COVID hit is the placement of culture in our society, and how can we as a society really lift it up even more. The commercial part of it is out there, we get that, but there's so much more to culture than just what is commercially successful. And that vector, I'd like to use their term, is really critical for the well-being of a society. And I think if there's anything that we can be doing as a field to lift that up, it really behooves us to do that.
Allison, that's absolutely brilliant. So two things. One, ASU actually has a program. We have the New American Council on Art and Design, and our National Accelerator is working to place artists in all segments of our community and of the country. And whether that is with the Transportation Bureau, that there should be no business, no government agency, no organization that an artist isn't integral in, because the conversation changes, as you well know. So I think that's very important, and we have to continue to insist upon that. The other thing is, and Michael knows this very well, is we have to wear many hats. So people will say to me, why do you belong to Rotary? I said, because every business leader in this community belongs to Rotary, and they need to see me as a business leader. And they do, and they have, and that's been important, but we can't just stay isolated. I actually also, the governor has me sit on the transportation committee, which sounds a little crazy, but the whole notion of how people move around and how people get from place to place. The other thing, and at a time when people are not working, the amount of people that we put back to work through the arts, and understanding not only our emotional and intellectual value, but our financial value. So I haven't had a governor since, you know, I love Janet Napolitano. All governors actually come to the theater, come to the series, but I am able to provide them with talking points that says annually, pre-COVID, we put $50 million into the tax base where we are, $50 million annually. And Janet has quoted Governor Ducey when he was having a phone Zoom thing about what are we doing about COVID, and he made some selected individuals, you know, a part of that. There were probably like 60 or 50 of us, and you put questions in the chat, and I put my question in the chat, and it didn't get answered, and it didn't get answered. And we got down, my husband was like, did Doug answer your question? I go, no. He got down to the last one, he goes, and I saved this question for last. Colleen, what is your question? And I know how important culture is. And I said, you know, you're putting together a task force to reopen this state. What arts person is on that task force? What artist is on that task force? And he said, you are now, which he did. But we have to put ourselves in those positions. No one is going to say, oh yeah, art and culture should be a part of it. So that's to answer your question, Allison. Having said that, there's also a chance that we will have a skinny economic package passed before January. There is a bill in that package called SOS, Save Our Stages. It is a bill that the commercial sector began with, the commercial theater, and then it included us not-for-profits, as well as other theaters of varying sizes. It's a $10 billion bill. The initial bill we put forward and we worked on for over a year was called Restart. That was a $480 billion bill. We knew that wasn't going to happen, but we do have strong chances. It's gotten through the House and approved. It's sitting in the Senate. The Senate has to get back to work, pass this small economic stimulus package, and make this a part of it. So for those of you who know your legislator, you know, SOS. For those of you who know donors who've given to your legislator, really important that they know SOS is important to culture. And partly the bill also, you know, recognizes the fact that where theaters and cultural organizations are, so are restaurants, so are hotels, so is the lifeblood of a community. But it is very important. And I was meeting at an international women's leadership meeting with UK, Australia, and the US, and everyone said, yeah, we're furloughed. And I went, oh yeah, and they go, so we can't go to work, but we get our salaries. I go, you get what? And so in those other countries, furlough means they get paid. They get paid, they get a salary. Furlough doesn't mean like it means to us. Furlough to us means you're not getting money, but they get paid. So now what they're just waiting to do is to reopen their theaters and reopen their restaurants. But those governments have said you are important. The other thing that we are doing is I'm working with 5 of our institute professors, which includes Daniel Bernard Romaine, Liz Lehrman, Michael Rode from Sojourn Theater. DBR is a composer, in case you don't know that. Liz Lehrman, you know, amazing choreographer. Maria Rosario Jackson, who is a cultural philosopher and sociologist. And Wanda de la Costa, who is the first and I think at this point only licensed Native American woman architect in North America. It's 2020. I always say, Wanda, this is crazy. But collectively, we have, and myself, we have worked on this program we're calling the Public Circle. It will be a gen required course for every college student that comes through that deals with Liz's critical response, that deals with Daniel's work as he looks at justice. It looks at building a creative campus, but that every student, whether you are taking math or you are taking, you know, geology, you have to take this course. So you leave with an understanding and a belief that culture is important to where you go. So that's one of the things we're talking about, because you have to grow this upwards and you have to grow it downwards, again, horizontally, to make this happen. And to have people understand that we're not a frill, we're not a luxury. We don't need to get paid because we love what we're doing. It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. So those kinds of things are happening. And I know our colleagues, my fellow colleagues with major university presenters, we're talking about this and we're talking about those programs. I will also mention, for those of you who are artists or work with artists, we have been putting together small pieces, small $5,000 pieces to go to, in particular to Black artists, and then how we show those pieces, and then looking at each of us throwing in $10,000 and then doing a much larger piece and how we stream it. So those, my colleagues, you should know those people as well, and I will get that information to David on the MUPs.
Thank you so much, Colleen. I'm looking at the time and realize I can't believe it. We're already at time. I want to say thank you so much for this wealth of information and inspiration that you're providing us with. I want to also second Capri in the chat of bravo. What an exciting program and requisite.
Thank you.
That you'll be
Thank you. And may I ask
introducing.
everyone to please follow up with David if you have another question, and he can get it to me, and whatever information I might have imparted and you might not have gotten all of it, ask him and then he'll get it to me, or write me. You have my email now. David, I'll save you a lot of work. You can just write me. Yeah. But this has been great, and I love seeing artists on here. Rulan, we have worked with many times. Christina, we have worked with many times. Love you, love you. Michael, very dear old friend. This has just been wonderful, just wonderful. And thank you for what you do. It is important for today, but it's important for that group behind us. Thank you.
Thank you.